I was standing in this little county courtroom leaning a bit more on my cane than I wanted to, when the judge told them to dim the lights, and my lawyer hit a key on his laptop and put a blown-up screenshot on the projector. A text message that said word for word, "Make sure you loosen the main bolts so the bridge fails completely." You could feel the whole room flinch, like the air got heavier all at once, and I watched the HOA president, Deborah Lang, go from smug and perfectly put together to stiff and pale in about 3 seconds. You know what I mean. I looked at that text, thought about all the mornings I'd been dragging my bad knee up the back trail because my only bridge home was chained off in the name of safety, and it hit me that this wasn't really about a homeowners association anymore. This was about someone deciding I didn't count, and me refusing to play along. My name is Mark Ellison. I'm 59X civil engineer, the kind of guy who actually reads the fine print in the soil reports. And years ago, I traded city noise and office politics for a strip of land along Larkspur Creek outside a small Wyoming town called Oak Ridge. Out there, the mornings smell like pine and cold water. The loudest thing most days is the creek talking to the rocks. And I thought I was done dealing with people who like power more than they like the truth. When I bought that land, there was no real driveway, just a rough track, and the creek cutting you off from the county road. If I wanted a truck, an ambulance, or a propane delivery to ever reach my place, I needed a real bridge, not a couple of 2x10s. Somebody left there in the 70s, so I did what I know how to do. I designed a reinforced concrete bridge, pulled every permit sat. Through boring county meetings, shook the inspector's hand. When he stamped my plans. And then I built that thing, one paycheck, one bag of cement, one long, stubborn weekend at a time. That bridge became my driveway, my coffee spot, my little piece of proof that I'd built a life with my own hands. A few years later, a shiny subdivision called Maple Hollow Preserve showed up a couple miles down the road, matching mailboxes, little walking paths with bark mulch people complaining about lawn heights in Facebook groups, the whole package. They had an HOA that printed rules like flyers. I never signed a covenant with them, never agreed to be part of their kingdom. My deed is older than their logo. For a long time, we just coexisted. They drove their clean SUVs past my dusty old pickup we'd nod, and that was that. Then, one cold Monday morning, I came back from 4 days out of town. Nothing dramatic, just visiting an old buddy and stocking up at Costco, and I turned off the county road, expecting to roll across my bridge like always. Instead, before I even saw the creek, I smelled hot metal. If you've worked with tools, you know that smell. Fresh, drilled steel and concrete dust hanging in the air, and my stomach tightened before I even knew why. I pulled up, and there it was. Thick black chains stretched tight across the mouth of my bridge, bolted into my concrete, with new anchor bolts, and in the middle, swinging slightly in the cold air, a shiny aluminum sign, HOA property, access revoked, in big red letters, with the Maple Hollow Preserve logo stamped underneath, like they'd just conquered a country. I actually laughed this short, disbelieving little laugh, because it was so absurd. I am not in their HOA. My land is its own parcel, and yet here I was, staring at my only access like it belonged to them now. The engineer in me woke up. I walked over, put my fingers on one of the bolts, felt that it was still warm from the drill, and realized whoever did this had probably just driven off. I let my eyes scan the tree line like I've done 1,000 times hunting and walking that road. And that's when I caught a flash of reflection in the brush. 20 feet away, I found a trail camera, black plastic zip tied to a sapling, wired to a battery pack half buried in leaves, aimed directly at my bridge, like my driveway was some kind of surveillance project. That mountain quiet I love so much stopped feeling peaceful and started feeling watched. The truck couldn't cross, so I had to back it up and take the only other option, a steep game trail that climbs the backside of my property. By the time I got to my porch, my knee was barking, and my patience was hanging by a thread. On my kitchen table sat an envelope with the Maple Hollow HOA logo in the corner. No stamp, no postmark, just dropped off like a demand. Inside were 3 pages. Boundary reassessment, unauthorized use of HOA common area, and a demand for $9,500 in fees due within 10 days. At the bottom was a phone number. I grew up in a world where you called people before you called lawyers. So I sat down, took a breath, and dialed. A woman answered in this smooth customer service voice. Maple Hollow Preserve Homeowners Association. This is Deborah. I said, Ma'am, my name is Mark Ellison. I'm up on Larkspur Creek. I just got a notice saying my bridge is on HOA land, and I owe you almost 10 grand. That can't be right. Her tone snapped from fake friendly to razor sharp. There's no mistake, Mr. Ellison. Our updated boundary assessment shows your structure within Maple Hollow jurisdiction. The board has voted. The fees are valid. I stared through my kitchen window at the creek that has been my property line since the day I signed my deed, and said, my bridge is fully on my land. It was surveyed and recorded with the county. Your subdivision ends 2 miles south. She gave me this little pause, not the kind where someone thinks the kind where they decide just how condescending they want to be. And then she said, old surveys are frequently superseded by current internal maps. If you wish to dispute the charges, you may do so through the appropriate legal channels. In the meantime, payment is due in 10 days. Non-payment will result in enforcement. I said, then let me see those maps. And she hit me with, we don't release internal assessments to non-members, putting this chilly little emphasis on non-members, like I was some stray dog at their gate. Then she closed it with, have a wonderful afternoon, and hung up. Paper might be cheap, but it tells on people if you read it closely enough. I pulled out my old file box spread. My recorded survey file. My bridge permits, my engineering approvals over the desk, and laid their glossy HOA map next to them. Right away, I could see the problems. The coordinate grid didn't match county standards. Larkspur Creek had been drawn, shifted just enough that my bridge appeared to sit on their shaded common area, and in the corner, in tiny gray text, were the words, Overlay Expansion Zone. That word, expansion, stuck with me. Expansion into what? Through who? I opened my laptop, typed Maple Hollow North Access Draft into the search bar, and eventually landed on an unsecured cloud folder some genius had left public. In there was a PDF called Northern Entrance Concept, and when I opened it, there on page 4 was a pretty color map with a big red arrow labeled Preferred North Access Route, pointing right at the bend of my creek where my bridge sits. Under Obstacle, it literally said, Existing Private Bridge owned by non-member landowner. And under Recommended Strategy, it said, Assert jurisdiction over riparian buffer to secure entrance. That was the first twist right there. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a strategy. And in their eyes, I wasn't a neighbor, I was an obstacle. A couple days later, they upped the stakes. I walked down to the creek again, and the setup had changed. The chains were still across my bridge, but now there was a full steel barricade installed 4 posts drilled deep into my concrete. Cross-bracing heavy chain, wrapped 3 times, and a big yellow sign that read, Emergency Safety Closure. Structural Failure Risk, authorized by Engineer Russell Dempsey. I set my coffee on a rock, stared at that thing for a long second, and then called the sheriff. Deputy Logan came out, took one look at my bridge, flipped through my permits and surveys, and said, "Everything you've got here looks solid, Mr. Ellison." I said, "Great." Then cut the lock. He shifted his weight, looked at the sign, and said, "I can't override an emergency closure signed by an engineer. If I cut this and something happens, the county is liable." I asked him, "Do you honestly believe this bridge is about to fall down?" He looked at the span, then at the paperwork, then back at the sign, and said quietly, "The issue isn't what I believe. The issue is that signature." Later we'd find out Dempsey had lost his license years before for falsifying soil reports. But in that moment, all it meant was I was effectively trapped by a piece of paper and a padlock. So I took the back trail again. It's steep, full of roots and loose rock, and that morning there was a thin layer of frost on it. One bad step, and my boot slipped. My feet went out from under me, and my knee slammed into a rock hard enough that I saw white for a second. I lay there in the dirt, cussing the sky, the HOA, and my own aging joints, then pushed myself up and limped the rest of the way home. At the clinic, the doctor asked how it happened, and I told him straight out. My only legal access home is blocked by a barricade. I had to use a game trail and slipped. He wrote that down. They did x-rays, fitted me with a brace, gave me meds, and handed me a neat little set of medical records that tied my injury directly to their closure. That stack of paper went into the same file as the fake map and the glossy plan, with my bridge labeled obstacle. On the way back, I called my friend Ethan, who happens to be a very patient attorney, and walked him through everything. He listened, then said, "Mark, this is not about dues. This is a land grab. Save every envelope, every email, every photo. From now on, nothing gets said without a record." Not long after that, almost like they were working off a checklist, I got a letter from the State Department of Environmental Quality saying there'd been a complaint claiming my bridge was blocking fish migration and causing serious erosion. I just sat there at the table and laughed because I remembered the conversations I'd had with county engineers about flow and habitat when I built that thing. But I also know how agencies can get spooked by buzzwords, so I called an old colleague named Hannah, a biologist who works on streams and salmon runs. I said, "You're gonna love this. My HOA says my bridge is killing the creek." She drove out with 2 grad students, put on waders, crawled under my bridge with measuring gear, and after an hour, she came back up dripping wet and said, "Your piers create rest pockets for fish, and your span keeps the water cooler in summer. If anything, this bridge helps." Then they walked downstream along the Maple Hollow side and found a row of fresh stumps where someone had cut riparian trees right down to the water to open the view. And that bare dirt was where the bank was collapsing. She documented everything, took photos, logged coordinates, and wrote a report that basically said, in nice scientific language, "Mark's bridge is not your problem. Maple Hollow's chainsaws are." Around the same time, somebody inside the HOA must have grown a conscience because emails started leaking. A local reporter called, told me my bridge was mentioned in internal documents as a Northern Access Challenge, wrote a piece about an HOA trying to grab control of a private bridge, and that story did what stories do in 2025. It bounced from the local paper to a couple online forums, then to Facebook and TikTok. Folks at the hardware store started asking, "You that bridge guy?" Yeah, that happened. You'd think that kind of attention might make people like Deborah back off, but instead of hitting the brakes, She floored it. One afternoon, a courier showed up with a thick envelope that looked at first glance like it came from the county engineer's office. Official seal, serious font. The whole thing. Inside were notices and recommendations, ordering me to remove my bridge within 14 days for safety and boundary reasons. Ethan drove up that evening, brought actual county documents with him, and we laid everything out side by side on my dining table. It didn't take long to see the fakes for what they were. Wrong formatting, wrong parcel numbers, and once again the same engineer who wasn't legally allowed to sign anything. That was the second big twist for me, watching an HOA slide from bullying with letters into forging government paperwork just to push one old guy off his own land. The nail in their coffin came early one morning before sunrise, when I woke up with that old job site feeling that something was off outside. I pulled on boots, grabbed my phone, and headed down the path. Halfway to the creek, I heard it. Metal on metal. Not the creek, not the wind, but tools. When I stepped out through the trees, there were two men in reflective vests at the base of my bridge, one with a drill on the guardrail, the other with a wrench on the support bolts, and a white van behind them, with Maple Hollow Maintenance Division painted on the side. Like this was all routine. I didn't yell. I hit record and said, "Morning. You want to explain why you're taking my bridge apart?" They tried to bluff it. "We're with the HOA, we've got authorization." And one of them held up this wrinkled sheet of paper with Deborah's signature, but no official anything on it. While he was waving it around his phone, buzzed the screen lit up, and I saw part of a message preview that said, "Make sure the bridge fails." I asked him to unlock it, and right there on camera were the full messages from a number saved as Deborah HOA. "Make sure you loosen the main bolts so the bridge fails completely. Cash is in the usual spot. Do it before sunrise. If anyone asks, say it's HOA property." You could see their shoulders sag as I read it out loud. When Deputy Logan arrived this time, there was no talk about his hands being tied. He seized the phone, their tools, the fake work order, and arrested both of them for trespassing and attempted destruction of private infrastructure. One of them broke and told him she'd paid them cash to make sure the bridge was gone before a county check. That was it. Between the fake maps, the environmental lies, the forged letters, and now the text messages ordering sabotage, Ethan had everything he needed. We filed suit. The county opened its own investigation. And that's how we ended up back in that courtroom with the lights low and my life on a big screen. Ethan walked the judge through the whole mess, the bogus expansion overlay, the fraudulent engineer, the environmental complaint Hannah had shredded with real data, the barricade that forced me up a dangerous trail and into a rock, the text messages about making my bridge fail completely. Maple Hollow's lawyer tried to paint it all as concern for safety and community, and Deborah sat there, back straight, acting like she'd just been poorly advised. Under oath, she said, "We never touched his bridge. We only acted on safety concerns." Then Ethan played the video of her hired crew loosening bolts and read her own texts out loud, and you could feel the room turn. Some of her own neighbors wouldn't even look at her anymore. The judge didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He said what they did was an abuse of power, confirmed that my bridge is fully and legally on my property, issued a permanent order barring Maple Hollow from ever interfering with my access, again ordered them to pay my legal fees and damages, and referred the forged documents and sabotage attempt to the district attorney. On top of that, he banned Deborah from serving on any HOA board in the state. When the gavel finally came down, I didn't feel like cheering. I just felt steady, straight, like someone had finally said out loud what I'd known from the moment I saw those chains. The line they crossed was real. A week later, snow started drifting down over Larkspur Creek. I walked out onto my bridge with a mug of coffee, leaned on the cold concrete railing. Somebody had tried to turn into evidence of failure and listened to the water slide under a thin skin of ice. No chains, no barricade, no hidden cameras staring at my driveway. Just my land, my work, and my peace. And here's the thing that still sits with me. It wasn't about the money, not really. It was about the fact that a group of people looked at an older guy at the end of a dirt road and decided his boundaries, his home and his voice were negotiable, as long as it made their expansion plan cheaper. So I'm honestly curious where you land on this. If your HOA chained off your only way home, called it safety, filed complaints about your bridge, then got caught sending texts to make it fail, would you fight like I did? Would you walk away and start over, or would you go even harder? Have you ever watched a board? A boss, a landlord. Any little pocket of power decide that someone like you didn't matter until they were forced to face the evidence. Tell me in the comments whose side you're on, what you would have done in my place, and whether you think HOAs protect communities or just dress up control in nice letterhead. Because I have a feeling this is one of those stories that's going to split people right down the middle.